Hey everyone, welcome back to The Explainer. Today we're diving into a quiet, but honestly a really profound mystery that unfolds in early childhood classrooms every single day. Picture a bright, energetic kid. They've got this incredibly vivid imagination, they absolutely love to play, and they seem perfectly engaged with the world around them. But then a seemingly basic instruction is given, and suddenly they just freeze up. It's a heartbreaking and super confusing moment for both the child and the educator. So today we're going to demystify exactly what is happening in those moments and explore the hidden barrier that might be standing in their way.
It's a scenario that educators and parents encounter all the time. You have these incredibly capable early years learners. They're building, they're running around, they are fully immersed in their environment. But when you look right at them and give a standard, everyday verbal instruction like, "time to clean up," they suddenly seem completely lost. They might stare blankly, look confused, or just copy whatever the kid next to them is doing. Now, to the untrained eye, it looks like they're just ignoring you, right? But as we'll see, the reality is way more complex, and honestly, fascinating.
Let's jump into Section 1. Meet Aarav and Kabir. To really wrap our heads around this, let's look at two totally brilliant young learners from our source material. 4.5-year-old Aarav and 5-year-old Kabir. Both of these boys possess some remarkable observed strengths. They have an immense desire to play, super vivid imaginations, and really strong physical capabilities. Aarav, for example, excels at complex visual puzzles and building these amazing, intricate block structures. Kabir has an incredible eye for detail when he's painting and can easily recall the complex rhythm and lyrics of classroom songs. Yet, despite these brilliant visual, motor, and musical skills, both boys hit a total brick wall when it comes to sequential instructions. If a teacher says something like, "Put the block away, get your coat, and line up," these highly capable boys suddenly struggle. This stark contrast right here is the central mystery of their classroom behavior. So, what is going on? That brings us to Section 2, the missing piece, the cognitive traffic jam. Okay, let's dive right in and look at the actual clinical barrier causing these really specific, frustrating moments. The mystery isn't about intelligence, and it definitely isn't about disobedience. It's all about how the brain handles incoming information. The missing piece of the puzzle for Aarav and Kabir is a condition known as language processing disorder, or LPD. I want to be absolutely clear here, based on our sources, this is not a physical hearing impairment. Both of these boys have perfectly typical hearing. They can physically produce speech sounds perfectly fine. Aarav, for instance, has perfectly clear articulation of individual words. The issue is purely a cognitive delay in decoding the meaning of auditory language. The sound gets in perfectly, but the processing, it just gets delayed. Now, what's really interesting about this next concept is this idea of a traffic jam. It is the perfect metaphor. Think of spoken words like cars zooming onto a highway. For most of us, traffic flows smoothly, right? But for a child with LPD, those words get onto the highway clearly, and then bam, suddenly there's a huge pileup. The brain absolutely knows the info is there, but trying to interpret the actual meaning of that auditory language creates a massive cognitive traffic jam. Everything just slows to a crawl, or completely stops. Moving right along to Section 3, spotting the hidden signs beyond not listening. So how do we actually spot this traffic jam in real life? We really have to look past the easy assumption that a kid is just tuning us out. Our sources identify 4 major behavioral markers of LPD, and you can see them so clearly by looking closely at Aarav and Kabir's daily classroom experiences. The first marker is receptive language gaps, especially when it comes to abstract or figurative language. Take a look at this comparison here. On side A, a teacher uses a super common idiom. "Clean up, it's a total zoo in here." On side B, we see Kabir's reaction. Because of his processing barrier, Kabir takes language incredibly literally. He hears the word zoo, and instead of grabbing a broom, the poor kid is literally looking around the classroom for a giraffe. That figurative language totally misdirected him away from the intended instruction, which was simply to tidy up.
The second marker is expressive word-finding difficulty. It's like they have the concept perfectly pictured in their minds, but they just cannot retrieve the specific linguistic label. Look at this quote from Kabir during show and tell. He really wants to talk about a paintbrush, but the word is totally stuck in that traffic jam. So he ends up using a generic placeholder, calling it that fuzzy stick thing. We see the exact same thing with Aarav, who constantly uses terms like that thing when he just wants to ask for a pencil. You can imagine how incredibly frustrating that must be for these kids.
The third and fourth markers are auditory latency, which we'll unpack in just a second, and background noise vulnerability. Think about your typical early years classroom. It's buzzing, it's chaotic, it's noisy. For a child with LPD, all that ambient noise is completely overwhelming. They just cannot isolate the teacher's voice from the hum of the AC or the kids chatting next to them. When the room gets loud, Kabir literally covers his ears and withdraws to a corner. And Aarav's processing ability drops off a cliff, and he just looks totally tuned out. It's just complete sensory and cognitive overload.
Okay, so what do we do about it? That brings us to Section 4, Clearing the Jam. Classroom Strategies.
Now that we know what's happening, let's shift gears. How do we actually help these kids thrive? Well, the fantastic news from our source data is that there are some highly actionable environmental and instructional tools we can use right now to start clearing out that cognitive traffic jam. So the absolute crucial point here all comes down to the number 7. This addresses that fourth marker I mentioned, auditory latency. Aarav, for example, needs a solid 5 to 10 seconds just to respond to a really basic question. If he's rushed, he just shuts down entirely. So the game changer here is the 7-second rule. After you ask a question or give a direction to a child with LPD, you silently count to 7 in your head before you repeat yourself or prompt them. You've got to give their brain the critical time it needs to clear the jam and process the words. And let's see how this wait time builds directly into our next big strategy, chunking commands. Remember how Kabir totally froze when he was told to hang up your coat, put your folder in the red bin, and sit on the carpet? That multi-step command was a massive pileup for him. The highly effective alternative is a really simple 3-step cycle. Step 1, give a single actionable command. Step 2, wait for them to finish it. Step 3, give the next command. It's that simple. Instead of dumping 3 steps on them at once, you break it down, making sure the processing road is totally clear before sending more information down the highway.
Beyond just how we talk, we can dramatically reduce that cognitive friction through a few really essential environmental tweaks. First up, visual schedules. Using actual concrete photos of the daily routines means they don't have to rely entirely on what's being announced out loud. Then there's preferential seating, literally just moving them away from the noisy toy kitchen or the loud fans so they aren't constantly fighting background noise. We can also use visual scaffolding, which is basically pairing spoken words with real objects. If you say, it's time to read, hold up the actual storybook. And finally, peer support. Pairing them with a structured play peer who can model language and giving them choice boards with pictures so they can point to what they want without the stress of trying to find the words.
All right, bringing it all together in Section 5, the village, building an action plan.
Now, obviously, a teacher cannot do all of this in a vacuum. Sustaining these inclusive strategies over the long haul takes a dedicated team. It really does take a village to build a consistent action plan that completely surrounds the child with support. A solid collaborative plan relies on 3 main pillars. First, it involves weekly check-ins with a speech-language pathologist to make sure the classroom visual strategies perfectly match up with targeted speech therapy goals. Second, and this is absolutely crucial, is family partnership. Those visual schedule symbols used in the classroom, they have to be shared with parents to keep things absolutely consistent between home and school. And third, you need a strict review timeline. In Aarav's case, they do an 8-week reassessment just to verify if the visual scaffolds and the wait time strategies are actually doing their job.
Which brings us to our final thought today. We've seen exactly how LPD creates these hidden walls for incredibly bright kids like Aarav and Kabir, and we've explored some pretty amazing strategies to help support them. But it definitely leaves us with a much bigger question to reflect on. Think about it. If something as incredibly simple as a 7-second pause, literally just waiting a few extra seconds, can clear a cognitive traffic jam and completely unlock a child's potential, are we giving the children in our own lives enough time to succeed? Take a step back and look at your own communication style today, and just remember the transformative, empathetic power of simply giving someone a little more wait time. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.